What if the most profound secrets of the monarchy weren't neatly tucked away in secure vaults, but were instead concealed within fleeting glances, intimate correspondence, and meaningful silence? Throughout the annals of British history, royalty has paraded in opulence while shrouded in enigma. Beneath the ornate portraits and illustrious titles reside 25 poignant tales of illicit affections, hushed conversations, and relationships that the passage of time sought to obliterate. These episodes extend beyond mere scandal. They embody recurrent themes, patterns of connection and disconnection that, once discerned, cannot be disregarded. This narrative is not solely comprised of royal intrigue. It serves as an alternative framework through which one can interpret the dynamics of power, crafted from subtle exchanges and lost alliances. Welcome to the hidden depths of the monarchy rarely explored in traditional historical narratives. As we embark on this journey into the obscure and the often overlooked, consider subscribing if you find yourself intrigued by the mysteries of the past that have been left unexplored. Engaging in this community is essential, allowing us to navigate the challenges posed by modern algorithms. Additionally, I invite you to share your geographical and temporal context, whether it's the quiet hours of midnight in Manchester or dawn in Sydney. Let's connect with those unearthing these historical secrets alongside us this evening. The intriguing figure of James VI of Scotland and I of England emerges from the shadows of history, revealing a complex manifold of affection and ambition. Not merely a monarch of his time, James left behind fragments of his life that suggest he was not afraid to express deep emotional connections, particularly with his male courtiers. His correspondence with a favored companion, a letter in which he professed a desire to survive solely for the other's sake, illustrates this distinct aspect of his character, softer yet remarkable for a king. Ascending to the English throne amid the tensions that marked his Scottish upbringing, James engaged in relationships that departed from the Stoic traditions expected of royalty. At the centre of his courtly affections was George Villiers, later the Duke of Buckingham, whom he lavished with titles and privileges, reflecting not only desire but a potential diversion from his political responsibilities. The language of their letters, infused with romantic fervour and affectionate metaphors, contrasts sharply with the expectations of a ruler. Observers of the day noted the unorthodox nature of these relationships. Pamphleteers remarked upon them derisively, ushering in a degree of scandal that reached the corridors of power. Yet, undeterred by criticism, James persisted, embodying a poignant contradiction as a sovereign who perceived himself answerable only to the divine and his intimate associates. This dynamic of love intermingled with politics raises questions about his motivations. Was it genuine affection, a strategic maneuver, or perhaps a retreat from solitude? The essence of power, in this instance, appears inadequate in filling the voids that lingered within him. Furthermore, James's embrace of such relationships set the stage for ensuing monarchs, implying a lineage of emotional depth woven into the fabric of royal legacy, where the next sovereign would not only whisper affections but embed them profoundly within the very structure of their reign. Edward II of England emerges as a monarch distinctly disconnected from the regal expectations of power and governance, favouring instead the rustic solace of manual labour and the companionship of his close allies. His bond with Piers Gaveston, in particular, transcended mere friendship. It was a profound affection that defied the conventions of courtly life. This relationship drew the ire and suspicion of many, leading one chronicler to label Gaveston as the king's evil genius, while another offered a less savoury description steeped in contemporary disdain. However, it is the depth of Edward's devotion to Gaveston that remains striking, illustrated vividly during public ceremonies where his gaze remained steadfastly upon his favoured companion. The emotional fallout of Gaveston's execution, a moment marked by acute sorrow for Edward, is a testament to the tragic intertwining of love and power in his reign. The king's grief was profound during Gaveston's exile, and it reached a breaking point upon his murder, revealing the raw vulnerability hidden beneath the armor of monarchy. This grief paved the way for Edward's infatuation with another figure, Hugh Despenser the Younger, whose influence spiraled the kingdom into civil strife, turning loyal barons into rebels and Edward into a poignant symbol of the dangers of emotional entanglement in ruling. Ultimately, even Isabella, his wife, became estranged, aligning against her husband. The historical narrative surrounding Edward II reveals a lack of intimate correspondence, save for hostile accounts, filled with tension and political intrigue, conveying a monarch whose passions led not only to his downfall but also to a legacy deeply nuanced by unspoken love and betrayal. Edward's reign concluded in ignominy, as he died incarcerated and humiliated, yet his emotional complexity continues to ripple through history, particularly as his throne passed to a successor whose own preferences mirrored Edward's, favoring young, attractive males in the shadows of the unsaid. For those who delve into this forgotten chapter of history, there lies an invitation to share the experience, encouraging discussions that unravel the subtle narratives often lost in the pages of time. William III, known as William of Orange, maintained a notable reserve in his public demeanor, often regarded as emotionally distant and purposefully reserved. Critics have described him as cold and unyielding, setting the stage for a multifaceted exploration of his personal relationships, particularly with two notable figures, Hans William Bentinck and Arnold van Keel. Bentinck, a childhood companion and loyal confidant, was entrusted with William's secrets, embodying a bond that transcended mere friendship. On the other hand, Van Keel, significantly younger and emerging from obscurity, quickly ascended through the ranks of the court to a position that caused a stir among the political elite of both the Dutch and English arenas. The rapid elevation of Van Keel, receiving titles and privileges akin to those of royal favor, did not go unnoticed, leading to underlying tensions and intrigue among those who watched from the sidelines. Queen Mary, William's first wife, died young, leaving him without a spouse or the companionship traditionally expected of a monarch. Instead, his correspondence with Bentinck and Van Keel reveals an emotional dependency that hints at deeper connections, described by some as intimate and tender, while others insist on interpreting them through a political lens. Supporters of William argue vehemently that these men were merely loyal aides, essential allies in navigating the treacherous waters of monarchy and statecraft. Nevertheless, the absence of explicit evidence regarding the true nature of their relationships leaves much to speculation, reminding us that the private spheres of historical figures can be elusive and complex. Ultimately, the enigmatic nature of William's affections challenges our understanding of loyalty, intimacy, and the unspoken bonds formed in the shadows of power, offering a glimpse into a world where emotions thrive behind closed doors. The narrative of kingship, thus, becomes one not only of public duty but also of private passions, where the distinction between affection and loyalty remains tantalizingly blurry. Richard I, known as the Lionheart, embodies the archetype of the medieval monarch, valiant, fierce, and triumphant in combat. He approached challenges with a warrior's ferocity, wielding the sword as both weapon and emblem of his reign. With a command of the French language, he waged campaigns against fortified castles and displayed scant interest in matters of romance, including those pertaining to his own matrimonial union. Yet, amid his myriad military exploits, it is a narrative framed not in the theatre of war but within the intimate confines of a chamber that endures most poignantly. During a visit to Paris in 1187, at the invitation of King Philip II, historical records suggest a closeness between the two rulers that transcended mere friendship. Some sources imply that they not only shared a bed on numerous occasions but also an emotional bond that bordered on the profound. As one chronicler noted, the King of France loved him as his own soul. This illustrates a level of companionship, marked by shared meals and restful nights, that diverges from typical royal diplomatic practices of the time, signifying a deeper connection. However, the complexities of their relationship only intensified with the passage of time, spilling into realms of political tension and personal longing. Richard's life was devoid of a legitimate heir, and his long absences from his wife left a distinct void in familial legacy. While adversaries may have leveled various accusations against him, their most persistent whispers revolved around his bond with Philip, a relationship cloaked in both admiration and perhaps unacknowledged affection. Intriguingly, for all the ink spilt on Richard's valiant sword, it is his silence regarding such intimate connections that tells an equally compelling story. Conversely, the subsequent Richard, his namesake, was left to navigate a court rife with intrigue and gossip, becoming a solitary figure amidst the clamour of those who delighted in speculation. This poignant dichotomy illustrates the layered existence of these two figures, weaving a narrative rich with nuance and emotional depth against the backdrop of historical grandeur. Richard II, often seen as more a poet than a king, found himself unprepared for the brutal demands of war, a fact that raised eyebrows in a nation where martial prowess was deeply valued. His disposition was one of gentleness and artistry, a sharp contrast to the sword-bearing leaders of his time. Among the myriad of courtly figures, his favoritism toward Robert de Vere, the Duke of Ireland, drew significant ire. This relationship, described as deeply affectionate, caused Parliament to suggest that Richard was a monarch controlled by an unworthy minion, an accusation that carried serious implications in an age where loyalty and power were paramount. Robert de Vere was not just a fleeting companion. He attained numerous titles, including the unprecedented Marquess of Dublin, and commanded his own armed force, sitting at the royal table and enjoying an intimacy with the king that prompted murmurs of scandal. When a coup forced Robert into exile in France, Richard's undiminished affection persisted, evidenced by his continued endearments, highlighting a profound and unyielding bond that many contemporaries deemed inappropriate. Chroniclers of the era were quick to critique this dynamic, not solely on the grounds of favoritism but veering towards a more intimate disapproval, suggesting Richard's emotional investments obscured his royal judgment. Even in marriage, the king's fondness for his male companions persisted unabated. He aspired to project a divinely appointed authority, yet his apparent vulnerability in devotion positioned him perilously close to danger. The tale of Richard II and his favourites unfolds a complicated narrative of power, vulnerability, and desire, revealing the intricate tapestry of human relationships woven within the backdrop of a tumultuous reign. George Villiers, the first Duke of Buckingham, did not simply ascend to the heights of power, he gracefully swept into it. Born into common lineage yet possessing an allure that could disarm even the sternest figures, Villiers captured the attention of King James I, thus marking the commencement of his extraordinary journey. Within a remarkably short span, James I elevated him from Gentleman of the Bedchamber to Duke of Buckingham, a progression that transcended mere political strategy. It was deeply rooted in a personal bond reminiscent of intimate affection. James famously referred to Villiers as his sweet child, and often closed his letters with declarations of undying devotion, epitomized by his words, "I wish to live and die with you." The intensity of their relationship fueled rampant speculation at court, evoking ire from Parliament and disapproving murmurs from the clergy. Nevertheless, James remained unwavering in his defence of the Duke, openly expressing his fondness, which included public displays of affection. Any courtier who raised doubts regarding Villiers' immense sway was met with accusations of envy from the king. Villiers, keenly attuned to the king's sentiments, adept maneuvered through the complexities of this dependence to secure a level of influence rarely seen among royal favourites. One can only ponder whether his actions stemmed from genuine affection, calculated manipulation, or a blend of both, a dichotomy that continues to perplex historians. What remains indisputable is Villiers' remarkable ability to shape the monarchy's agenda. As the next royal on the horizon stepped into the limelight, he carried with him a penchant for artistry, sophistication, and an inheritance of ceaseless intrigue. Prince George, Duke of Kent, emerges as an evocative figure within the pantheon of the British royal family, embodying a curious blend of modernity and tradition. As a brother to kings, his charisma was palpable. He navigated the social strata of the day with an effortless elegance, fluent in French and impeccably attired, easily alternating between the refined halls of royalty and the lively atmosphere of jazz clubs. This juxtaposition, however, made him a man seemingly out of sync with the more rigid expectations of the monarchy, as he aligned far more closely with the contemporary vibrancy of a Gatsby-esque world. In this backdrop of style and sophistication, rumors flourished. His name drifted through bohemian circles, entangled in romantic associations with a diverse array of artists, including actors and writers, regardless of gender, a reflection of a society still grappling with the fluidities of identity and affection. There exists a tantalizing suggestion of a significant connection with playwright Noel Coward, as well as whispers of a charming diplomat who mysteriously vanished from public records. While formal acknowledgement of such relationships remained elusive, the unspoken implications painted a vivid portrait of George as a man of deep emotional complexity. His life, though tragically short due to a premature death in a puzzling air crash, inhaled the essence of a modern royal, part princely figure, part cinematic icon, allegedly unafraid to embrace love in its myriad forms. The Duke's existence straddled a fine line between the expectations of his lineage and a burgeoning modern ethos that challenged such confines. In stark contrast, the next royal would navigate a realm laden with its own complexities, one where the weight of fashion and whispers of controversy would often overshadow the crown he bore, hinting at the struggles of a family forced to reconcile their image with the mores of the time. Edward VII, Duke of Windsor, presents a complex tapestry of royal life intertwined with the personal choices that would ultimately reshape monarchy and societal perceptions of love and duty. Renowned for his audacious abdication in favor of love, Edward was a figure who embodied an intriguing blend of elegance and ambiguity. His existence oscillated between the grandeur of royal obligations and the alluring vibrancy of the Jazz Age, where soirees in Paris were his stage, and mingling with the artistic elite became second nature. Yet, amid the headlines dominated by his romance with Wallis Simpson, lingered whispers of earlier intimacies, subtle connections with men that suggested profound bonds, although never explicitly defined. This era, marked by high society's passions and intrigues, found Edward often at the center, his vibrant personality driving him towards tactile affection and emotional intensity. His frequent disregard for royal traditions and an evident reliance on the validation of fashionable gentlemen of the times painted a picture of a man in constant negotiation between his desires and his status. Correspondence from his formative years reveals deep-seated affections that skirt the boundaries of conventional wisdom, as the palace's discretion served to hide much more than mere romances. Edward VI's public defiance of royal expectations culminated in his historic abdication, but the implications of his actions rest upon a more profound truth. Who were the figures that faded into obscurity before Wallis Simpson emerged into the limelight? As history evaluates his choices, one must consider the shadows of other relationships suppressed under the weight of royal duty, illuminating an intricate narrative of love, loss, and the relentless scrutiny of the crown. Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence, often referred to as Eddie, occupied the status of second in line to the British throne and became a focal point for the various intrigues of the late Victorian era. Known for his pallor and a demeanor that suggested disinterest, Eddie was not regarded as particularly intelligent. However, the scrutiny surrounding him was not directed towards his mental faculties but rather his conduct and associations. Dark whispers emerged from London's clandestine society, swirling around secretive male clubs and sensational scandals, particularly the notorious brothel located on Cleveland Street. Although no formal charges were ever laid against him, Eddy's reputation was marred by implications of scandal, with names of the time surfacing in a manner that wrecked careers. Debates among historians continue to dissect the veracity of these allegations. Some argue they stemmed from guilt by mere association, while others highlight his frequent disappearances during significant investigations, raising eyebrows about his potential involvement. A minority standpoint posits his innocence, attributing his plight to sheer misfortune. Beyond the Cleveland Street affair, Eddy's circle was characterized by nonconformity, with his expressive letters and erratic behavior contributing to an enigmatic legacy. Tragically, he died at the tender age of 28, leaving an aura of intrigue surrounding him. Was he merely a victim of palace gossip, or were there deeper secrets that the monarchy might have sought to shield? Such questions linger, casting Eddy as a spectral figure in the annals of royal history. As we turn our focus to the next royal heir, it becomes apparent this individual would grapple with his own set of obsessions, those reflective of the inclinations favoured by his father. Charles II's ascent to the throne of England was marked not only by the transfer of royal power from his father, James I, but also by the ongoing presence of James's favourite, George VI, the Duke of Buckingham. Rather than fading from the scene upon James's demise, Buckingham transitioned seamlessly to Charles's court, where he held a position of significant influence. The bond between the king and the Duke was not merely professional. It was intimate and fiercely defended by Charles against the critiques of observers, many of whom murmured about the depth of their relationship. While Buckingham officially served as a trusted advisor and military leader, the public perception of him was far more layered and complex. Satirical commentators and political adversaries frequently speculated about the nature of his ties to the king, suggesting an almost delusional infatuation on Charles's part. The assassination of Buckingham marked a profound turning point in Charles's emotional landscape. In a display of unabated grief, he donned mourning attire for weeks, retreating into a solitude that communicated his deep sorrow to the court and beyond. Letters from this period depict a ruler crushed by loss, struggling to maintain his composure and duties. Despite his affections for his wife, Henrietta Maria, the intensity of his mourning for Buckingham captivated onlookers, prompting a spectrum of interpretations, from fraternal lamentation to suggestions of a more romantic attachment. This pattern reveals a recurring theme in the lives of British monarchs, where personal connections often overshadow familial and royal responsibilities. Charles's profound sorrow stands in stark contrast to the more exuberant self-love demonstrated by his successor, hinting at the complexities of royal affection and the burdens of emotional ties that intertwine with the fabric of governance. Henry VIII is often remembered in the context of his 6 wives, whose destinies ranged from unfortunate to tragic, marking him as a figure of dramatic marital upheaval. However, his early years unveil a more understated yet poignant narrative, centered on profound male friendships, deep emotional attachments, and the kinds of relationships that historical accounts often overlook. One such bond was with Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, a childhood companion with whom Henry shared not only formative years but also intense experiences of camaraderie, from warfare to celebration. Henry's favoritism towards Brandon was striking, as he bestowed upon him both familial alliances, marrying him to his own sister, and considerable wealth, openly forgiving his political faux pas. Observers at court noted their closeness with a mixture of intrigue and discomfort, questioning whether their connection merely constituted brotherly affection or hinted at a deeper, possibly romantic, entanglement. Moreover, Henry surrounded himself with favoured youths, pages, jousting partners, and chosen companions, who remained in his inner circle long after tournaments had concluded. His youthful letters to these male friends were filled with fervent emotion, overt affection, and theatrical expressions of sentiment, elements that often go unexamined in historical discussions about him. This is particularly puzzling given that Henry is frequently portrayed as the archetypal figure of royal masculinity, a role that he wielded with both power and authority. Yet, beneath this veneer of strength lay a profound sense of isolation, obsession, and an unfulfilled longing for connection that frequently defied conventional expectations. While Henry ruled through dominance, it appears that his successors veered toward leadership characterized by loyalty, even as the bonds with their closest allies hinted at complexities that transcended mere duty. Prince Frederick, Duke of York, is often immortalized in the nursery rhyme The Grand Old Duke of York, yet his life unveils a multifaceted individual marked by the juxtaposition of military notoriety and personal enigma. As the second son of King George III, Frederick's relentless ascent within the ranks of the British Army led him to the esteemed position of Commander-in-Chief. However, it was amid the exigencies of military life, barracks, campaigns, and prolonged assignments, that Frederick cultivated profound relationships, primarily with trusted male companions, some of whom swiftly ascended to high ranks themselves. Their correspondences, though predominantly formal in nature, occasionally reveal an intimate warmth, especially in the context of a certain unnamed officer, frequently termed his constant companion. Frederick's marriage was characterized by strain and childlessness, compelling him to spend much of his later years in the company of men rather than with his wife. This lifestyle, devoid of overt scandal yet rife with unspoken complexities, invites speculation about his private life, hinting at secrets perhaps carried to the grave. While Frederick lived shrouded in these mysteries, his nephew, who will come into focus next in our narrative, illuminated the era with a more youthful vibrancy, forging connections that continue to challenge historical interpretation. Prince Henry Frederick, the Prince of Wales, stood poised to inherit the throne as the firstborn of James I. In stark contrast to his father, he embodied athleticism, discipline, and an idealism that captivated those around him, drawing the attention of biographers who found his charisma irresistible. Tragically, he passed away at the tender age of 18, leaving behind not only a nation in mourning but also a complex tapestry of emotional connections that resist simplistic interpretation. Surrounded by an exceptionally devoted group of young male courtiers, Henry's relationships were characterized by affectionate nicknames, heartfelt poetry, and a closeness that often raised eyebrows. Among them, Robert Carr garnered particular attention, receiving profoundly intimate gestures from Henry, gifts imbued with meaning, extended letters, and very public displays of their bond. Some observers interpreted these gestures as exuberant youthfulness, while others questioned their propriety. Henry's preferences appeared to lean away from the conventional romantic entanglements arranged by the court. He thrived instead in the company of those who shared his passions for poetry, fencing, and the theatrical. His correspondence was imbued with sentiments of longing, and when he succumbed to typhoid fever, the reaction was profound, as various factions within the court mourned not only for the potential future king but for a young man whose deep affections, though never explicitly scandalous, suggested something more intense beneath the surface. Caught in the liminal space of what might have been, Henry represents a poignant reminder of unfulfilled potential within the monarchy. In contrast, the next figure in our narrative chose a different path, redirecting his destiny from the throne toward the tumult of the battlefield, where loyalty was often cemented in conflict and the lines between comradeship and affection blurred significantly. Prince Rupert of the Rhine emerged as a prominent figure during the tumultuous period of the English Civil War, characterized not merely by his royal lineage as the nephew of Charles I but more significantly by his prowess on the battlefield. A soldier at heart, Rupert distinguished himself through legendary cavalry charges, his tousled hair often serving as a visual emblem of his adventurous spirit. His reputation soared to heroic heights, acquiring a mythic quality among his contemporaries. However, Beneath the bravado and martial glory lay a complex web of relationships, particularly with Colonel Richard Neville, who accompanied Rupert throughout his campaigns and periods of exile. Their bond, underscored by an exchange of letters, marked by formality yet imbued with deep emotional resonance, suggests a connection that transcended typical military alliances. Rupert's protective instincts for Neville during skirmishes, as well as his efforts to secure Neville's lands after the monarchy's restoration, raise questions about the true nature of their relationship. Was it simple friendship, profound loyalty, or something more ambiguous that may elude even Rupert's own understanding? Notably, Rupert never embraced marriage, instead opting for a life predominantly surrounded by men, which deepens the intrigue surrounding his personal dynamics. His unwavering loyalty is well documented, but as is often the case with royal figures, his inner world remains enigmatic. Nevertheless, the bond he shared with Neville suggests a depth of personal connection that starkly contrasts with the expected norms of military camaraderie. This theme of personal relationships shaping larger narratives certainly finds its next expression in our following royal, who faced accusations of allowing her private feelings to sway not only battles but the very course of a monarchy. James II, the seventh King of Scotland, emerged as the final Catholic monarch of England from a backdrop of exile and personal tribulation. His adolescence was steeped in solitude, shaped by the shadows of suspicion, warfare, and the anticipation of a restoration that perpetually eluded him. During these formative years, whispers began to surface, suggesting unorthodox affections particularly involving his male attendants. These were not overt liaisons or sensational public scandals. Rather, they were subtle insinuations, preserved in memoirs, exchanged discreetly in Restoration-era coffeehouses, and occasionally noted in the margins of political treatises. A significant focus was directed towards his relationship with a specific valet, whose influence appeared disproportionately significant given his standing. While specifics were scarce, the underlying implications were not overlooked. Even after the monarchy's restoration, James continued to face scrutiny, not solely due to his Catholic beliefs but also because of his reticence regarding specific male relationships. His two marriages and fatherhood endeavored to project an image of devoutness. However, the enduring specter of doubt persisted, stemming not from overt scandal but from an absence of clear female companionship during his youth, a defensive tone evident in his writings, and a narrow fixation from critics on his private affairs. Ultimately, James's downfall did not stem from romantic entanglements but from his unyielding faith. Nevertheless, those early relationships stand out as enigmatic details within his narrative. His legacy would be inherited by his son, who would come to rule not only a realm steeped in secrets and complexities but also share the company of men with whom he might share more than mere loyalty. George, the Prince Regent, epitomized a life marked by excess and contradiction, possessing more waistcoats than principles, and accumulating debts that far exceeded his caution. Known for his ostentatious lifestyle, George IV was characterized by his flamboyance and chronic theatricality, frequently adorned in garish attire. His notorious liaisons with women are well documented, yet what often escapes scrutiny are the whispered rumors of his close relationships with stylish young men, an element of his legacy that invites deeper examination. As Prince of Wales, George engaged with a vibrant circle of artists, actors, and aristocrats, young men whose allure was arguably equal to his own. Among these associates was the strikingly attractive figure of George Bryan, known as Beau Brummel, who not only shared social occasions with the prince but exerted an almost authoritative influence over his sartorial choices. Their bond was one fraught with intensity and dependency, punctuated by a public falling out that bore resemblance to a romantic split rather than a simple dissolution of friendship. Contemporary satirists of the time were not discreet in their portrayals, often suggesting that their relationship transcended mere friendship, indicating the potential for more intimate connections. Speculations regarding George's private inclinations circulated through London's elite, adding layers of ambiguity to his already complex public image. Ultimately, his ill-fated marriage could not erase the imprints left by his deep and often scrutinized bonds with men. The next figure in this intricate narrative presents a stark contrast, her existence molded not through the lens of opulence, but through the vast uncertainties of the sea, where events unfolded with unpredictable ramifications, often leaving deeper marks than mere affluence ever could. Prince William Henry, known later as William IV, emerged from the complex tapestry of the 18th century British Navy, where he donned not a crown but the garb of a sailor. As the third son of King George III, his early career at sea was ostensibly a means to forge his identity and achieve personal significance. However, this venture led him into the realm of profound, often uncharted male camaraderie, revealing a dimension of relationships that transcended societal norms of masculinity and hierarchy. Historical documentation, including naval logs and correspondence, illuminate the depth of his connections, particularly with a young lieutenant who became a steadfast companion throughout his service, sharing living quarters well beyond customary requirements and receiving preferential treatment in career advancements and promotions from William. Though he is frequently remembered for his scandalous liaisons with actress Dorothy Jordan and the resultant illegitimate offspring, the nature of his maritime friendships has intrigued scholars for years, prompting questions about the emotional dynamics present in a world where isolation fostered interdependence. The Navy, steeped in a mix of traditional rituals, some overtly innocent, others subtly suggestive, allowed for a blurring of lines between companionship and deeper emotional attachment. While William's constitutional reign was relatively short and marked by a lack of significant events, his early experiences were fraught with contradictions, publicly adhering to heterosexual norms while privately navigating complex dependencies that remained elusive. In contrast, his successor would inherit a far more controversial legacy, one that would intertwine with public perception and reverberate through the corridors of power, forever altering the landscape of royal reputation. Prince Ernest Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, was a figure seldom admired, even in the context of aristocracy. His characterization as stern and secretive did little to endear him to his contemporaries. Although his reputation as a political conservative and a figure embroiled in scandal is often highlighted, it is the more discreet aspects of his personal life that offer a richer, albeit more complex, portrait. His relationships with a select group of male companions, first in England and later in Hanover, remain largely eclipsed in official narratives. Unlike his more charismatic siblings, Ernest cultivated exceptionally close bonds with certain male courtiers, many of whom lingered in his service long past their practical utility. While documentation of their correspondence is limited, the patterns that emerge are illuminating. They speak to a culture of lavish gifts, persistent proximity, and abrupt terminations of employment, often followed by quiet pensions. Scandals in his life occasionally veered toward the grotesque, yet what is particularly striking is the overarching theme of control. Preoccupied with maintaining a polished public image, he ensconced himself with men whose functions often straddled the line between the professional and the intimate. Upon ascending to the throne of Hanover, he reigned in solitude, his wife having passed away. His court comprised predominantly male figures, many devoid of clear, official responsibilities, bound instead by loyalty and discretion. This atmosphere of silence not only defined his inner world but also hints at the broader implications of royal privacy, suggesting that the absence of public affection can, in itself, provoke deeper inquiries into the nature of human relationships within the enigmatic sphere of monarchy. Prince Agilus, Duke of Cambridge, stands out in a family embroiled in scandal as an enigmatic figure, embodying a curious blend of silence and suspicion. The 10th son of King George III, His existence was marked by a remarkable commitment to order and obedience, coupled with an unusual absence of romantic entanglements, especially those involving women. Rather than the expected tales of flirtation or scandal typical of his lineage, Agelus's early adult life presents an intriguing void, filled instead with records of enduring and profound friendships among men, particularly during his lengthy terms in Germany. Serving as Viceroy of Hanover, he cultivated a domestic court predominantly composed of young, unmarried men, some of whom remained in his service for numerous years. The structured nature of their positions belied the intimacy of their relationships, where loyalty prevailed over traditional courtly obligations. These companions benefited from Agelus's patronage, receiving various forms of support, and, at times, discreet pensions when prevailing circumstances shifted. He postponed marriage until his 40s, a stark contrast to other royal bachelors who often faced dynastic pressures or public scrutiny earlier. His union was primarily diplomatic in nature, yielding heirs without the fanfare often associated with royal matrimony. Although Agelus himself was devoid of rebellion or radicalism, the silent yet profound dynamics of his male-centric domestic life convey significant insights into his character. As he maintained a serene existence, a tumultuous wave approached the next generation, filled with rumors, warfare, and complex royal protocols that surrounded friendships which frequently defied established norms. Prince Henry, the Duke of Gloucester, remains a largely overlooked figure in the annals of history, often eclipsed by the grand narratives of World War II and the more boisterous personas of his royal siblings. Much of his life was spent in the shadows, not due to any notoriety or scandal, but rather his pronounced reticence and preference for privacy. As a young man, he exhibited considerable social awkwardness, particularly when it came to navigating the demands of court life and the expectations of romantic entanglements, often relegated to mere state functions for feminine company. What sparked quiet observation among palace insiders was not just his shyness, but his profound loyalty to a close-knit group of male friends. This camaraderie endured through the years, contrasting starkly with the romantic exploits of his brothers, who attracted public scrutiny through their numerous marriages and affairs. While they reveled in the limelight, Henry maintained a strategy of avoidance regarding romantic partnerships. His emotional landscape appeared to be entirely defined by these intimate friendships, leading to speculation about the nature of his bachelorhood. His eventual marriage, undertaken later in life and seemingly out of obligation, bore the scent of formality rather than genuine connection, reinforcing the notion that there was something inherently enigmatic beneath his composed exterior. Was his demeanor the result of true social apprehension, or did it mask deeper, more intricate complexities? The realities of his inner life remain enshrined in the private documents held in guarded archival collections, yet the recurring motif of a royal figure enveloped in male companionship persists, shadowed by rumors that evade even the most grandiose royal celebrations. Ultimately, Henry's existence can be seen as a profound and subtle exploration of companionship, one that, while quiet, was laden with nuances that modern interpretations might deem radically progressive in their emotional intimacy. Prince John, the youngest offspring of King George V and Queen Mary, remains a poignant figure in the tapestry of British royalty, an embodiment of neglect and misunderstanding. Known affectionately as the Lost Boy, John grappled with various challenges, including epilepsy and signs possibly indicative of autism. This led to his withdrawal from the public eye at an early age, relegated to a life of seclusion at Sandringham, away from the limelight and the rigid expectations of royal life. Despite being sidelined from the court, John forged deep emotional connections, particularly with his head caregiver, Lala Bill. Their relationship, underscored by profound affection and mutual reliance, blossomed amid the sterile environment of the palace. Letters and personal accounts reveal a bond characterized by warmth and trust, transcending societal norms. In a royal household defined by hierarchy, their intimacy stood as an act of defiance against the upper-class conventions of the time. It reflected a pure, nurturing love, devoid of any scandalous implications, yet radical for its challenge to established decorum. The untimely death of young Prince John at the tender age of 13 marked a significant emotional loss, with Lala Bill bearing the heaviest burden of grief. His sorrow, deep and visceral, was deliberately obscured from official records, signaling the lengths to which the royal family went to maintain their image. Nevertheless, those close to John asserted that he took his last breaths in the embrace of the individual who truly recognized him. This bond, a quiet, unconditional love, sets a profound stage for our next exploration of royal complexities, where the prevalence of such emotions would continue to incite doubt and scrutiny for years to come. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, served as the steadfast backbone of the British monarchy, epitomizing a consort hardened by the crucible of war, a man whose sparse words and muted emotions established an aura of control and responsibility. His demeanor projected a detached aristocracy, rendering outside speculation almost a breach of decorum. Yet, the curious gaze of biographers could not overlook the occasional fissures in this regal facade. Throughout his nascent naval career, Philip fostered notably close relationships with fellow officers, relationships likely born from shared peril and extended deployments. However, a select few stood out for their intensity and duration. Though rumors existed, whispers of friendships that hinted at an unusual protectiveness for military camaraderie, these were swiftly dismissed or relegated to the margins of historical discourse. Some commentators would later seize upon these connections, lacking concrete corroboration, yet identifying an enigmatic pattern of silence and divergence that invited scrutiny. While Philip's robust, straightforward persona might render such insinuations absurd, the palace's silence on these matters invites further contemplation, as biographers often navigate these delicate topics with a notable haste. It might appear inconsequential, but in the realm of royal narratives, the moments dismissed with laughter often merit deeper reflection. Conversely, while Philip's allegiances remained largely unexamined, the next figure in the royal narrative is not of noble lineage, yet he wielded significant influence over a monarch, fundamentally altering the monarchy's trajectory. In the intricate tapestry of the Stuart court, few figures cast as long a shadow as Sir Thomas Overbury, a favoured courtier and confidant of King Charles I. While his name may lack the official titles often bestowed upon nobility, his role in the royal dynamics extended far beyond mere ceremonial duties. Overbury, a court poet, exemplified an intimate relationship with Charles I, a connection marked by intellectual and emotional depth that proved perilous within the treacherous political landscape of the time. Though his allegiances ostensibly lay with the court of James I, Overbury's influence subtly permeated the sphere surrounding the youthful Charles, positioning him within circles of power alongside prominent figures like Buckingham. Their interactions, characterized by a rich correspondence layered with refined prose and an undercurrent of guarded intimacy, suggest a dependency that eluded explicit acknowledgement. This burgeoning bond, however, ultimately led to Overbury's tragic demise. He fell victim to poisoning in the Tower of London under dubious circumstances, entangled in the rivalries that pervaded the court both politically and personally. The narrative surrounding Overbury reveals not only the machinations of court politics but also a personal story fraught with danger. Rumors suggested that he had insights into matters of royal favor and affection that, if exposed, could disrupt the fragile status quo. Following his downfall, history remembers him not merely as a casualty of court intrigue, but as a figure whose absence revealed the vulnerabilities within Charles's circle. In Overbury's wake, the king sought to replace his lost confidant, drawing in new favorites who would ultimately replicate the patterns of devotion and unease that characterized his relationship with Overbury. Thus, the story of Sir Thomas Overbury remains a poignant reflection on loyalty, ambition, and the complexities that defined the era, echoing through time as a reminder of the interplay between personal relationships and the relentless pursuit of power. Prince Charles Edward Stuart, known to history as Bonnie Prince Charlie, embodies the romantic ideal of a tragic hero, a figure immortalized as the emblem of lost aspirations during the Jacobite Rebellion. His captivating presence and charismatic leadership painted him as a noble figure doomed to fail. Nevertheless, amid the romanticized tales of his attractiveness to women, it is noteworthy that his most profound and documented connections in his youth were with men. Chief among these was John Hay of Westleague, often referred to as his beloved companion, who played a role far surpassing that of a mere political ally. Hay was an ever-present figure in Charlie's life, to such a degree that Jacobite leaders grew concerned about his considerable influence over the prince's decisions. Their correspondence reveals a depth of affection and even expressions of jealousy towards one another. Following the 1745 uprising's failure, Hay remained one of the few permitted to stay with Charles during his subsequent exile. However, this companionship came to an abrupt and bitter end, the reasons for which remained shrouded in mystery, whether it was a personal dispute, a politically charged decision, or something more intimate. The separation marked a significant shift for Charles, who became markedly quieter and more introspective. In a rebellion characterized by loyalty and strong alliances, the most profound betrayals may have originated not from external conflicts, but rather from the intricate social circles of European courts, where closeness often bore hidden costs. Thus, we conclude our exploration with this overlooked prince, whose story was largely unremarkable, save for the lingering whispers of his complex relationships. Prince George of Cambridge remains a largely overlooked figure in the annals of 19th century history. As a grandson of George III, George led a life characterized by military service and public engagements, marked by a conspicuous absence of scandal. However, it is often individuals like him, those who tread quietly in the shadows, whose stories reveal deeper complexities. He remained single until well into his 40s, eventually marrying a commoner, an actress, which flouted established royal conventions. In addition to this surprising choice, George cultivated a close-knit group of male officers who not only served alongside him but also shared his life in a manner that transcended mere camaraderie. These men frequently traveled with him, dined at his table, and appeared in his personal correspondence, suggesting a domestic intimacy that is often elided in royal histories. Notably, one officer was described as George's constant companion for over 10 years. Upon the officer's death, George's profound grief manifested in an absence from public life for weeks, and his journals conveyed an emotional depth indicative of a bond that surpassed professional ties. This raises poignant questions. Was it love, steadfast loyalty, or a profound friendship that transcends traditional classifications acknowledged in royal accounts? Ultimately, George's story echoes a recurring motif in royal history: men who existed both within and beyond the royal sphere, shaping a monarchy that has historically thrived on outward appearances while concealing deeper affections behind closed doors.